Entrepreneurship and the startup culture. A very hot topic, very much in discussion, getting a lot of encouragement from the government also, from the Indian government also, globally also. So one needs to study it carefully and understand how it understand it in its proper with in the right perspective with the right context. Lot of it when it started, this whole, I mean, it's not something new. Entrepreneurship is basically when you start a new business or a new venture. It's not when you inherit something. It's not a family managed business in which the baton is passed on from the father to the son. Here you start out on your own and create something of your own, a venture, a business enterprise. Doesn't have to be products, can be services, or can be any kind of business venture, a commercial activity. So it's not a new idea. I mean, people have been leaving jobs and doing businesses and starting out on their own, and that has been there for going on for quite some time. But now it has become an organized kind of thing where one talks a lot about it. Now, basically, let's look at the issues, and then we come to the current issues. Entrepreneurship is good when it works out. Obviously there are benefits, but generally speaking, and there are various reasons why people want to do this: make more money, or create something different, or be their own bosses, and all kinds of create value, autonomy, various kinds of things propel them to do this. And the issue is, statistically speaking, many new businesses fail. Maybe even 90% or more than 90% new businesses fail, startups fail. And sometimes you hear this statistic, but generally you hear about these big entrepreneurs, this rags to riches stories, these empire builders, these captains of industry, college dropouts who made it big, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and people there is a lot of glamour and heroism, captains of industry and all that. But what one needs to realize it is that looking at it statistically speaking, if 90% of new ventures fail, then very few people are going to make it to that level. And many will fail, some will survive, some will do well, some will do better, and only very few, extremely few, will reach those dizzying heights and stuff like that. So there is a very high risk of failure, firstly, and high risk, high reward is a thing that one often says in finance. So in business enterprise, the risk of failure is extremely high. So one has to be prepared for it. And the other thing is, there are no set rules. I mean, there is no set formula that if you do this, your business will succeed or your entrepreneurship venture will take off. Maybe you will succeed initially and maybe plateau later on, maybe fail, maybe keep on doing better. So whether you will succeed or fail, what is the level of success that you will reach, there are all sorts of, it's a huge spectrum out there. So it's a risky affair. Many people start, everybody doesn't click, everything doesn't click. So that is one thing that must be kept in mind. Don't do it just because others are doing it, because it is fashionable or trendy or the in thing to do, or there is a fashion kind of a thing. It sounds very glamorous and very heroic, because those who enter it, and some of them maybe do get lucky and do well, and some probably struggle very hard and succeed, and some struggle hard and fail. So you don't know the whole story, you don't know the story of every individual or every enterprise. So don't do it just because of the glamour attached to it or the heroism attached to it, because everybody is not going to be a Dhirubhai Ambani or a Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, and if everybody became a Dhirubhai Ambani, then the value in being a Dhirubhai Ambani would go down. Dhirubhai Ambani has been is an icon because there was only one Dhirubhai Ambani. I mean, 130 crore Indians, if everybody becomes Dhirubhai Ambani, then, you value what is rare. You value the things that is not common, that is unique, that is different. So, only a few are going to reach that thing. So, statistically speaking, one's chances of making to that level are extremely low. One has to keep it in mind. Without trying to discourage people, I'm just trying to paint a realistic picture here. So it is risky. There are no set formula. What works, what doesn't work, what will make it successful, not successful. We'll have to keep changing your strategy and all that. Secondly, it is very lonely because in a company you have the safety and security of being part of a larger, or when you are an employee in a company, you are part of something bigger than yourself. There is a sense of belonging to something bigger. Whereas a business entrepreneur is essentially a lonely guy. He or she is a lonely person. It is lonely at the top, as they say. So loneliness is one of the major challenges that an entrepreneur has to face. He and or she has to fight her own battles and demons on his or her own. So that's one of the challenges. One used to say in olden days that there is a rule of 1,000 days. 1,000 days is something like 3 years. You struggle for 3 years, and if you survive for 3 years or 1,000 days, then you're made, sort of, and your enterprise will take off. But I don't think there is any mathematical or statistical sanctity to that, and there is no guarantee that you will make it after 1,000 days, or you will survive for 1,000 days, and even after you survive for 1,000 days you will thrive. So forget, all those rules have to be thrown out of the window. The story for every individual is going to be different, so that is crucial to understand. Otherwise, one would simply copy and become become an immensely successful entrepreneur, which doesn't happen. So that is one issue that one must keep in mind. It's much more difficult, and when we say something is difficult, realizing it at an intellectual is quite different than actually experiencing it. I might say, oh, okay, it will be difficult, but I am prepared for that difficulty. But that is your appreciation of the difficulty is only at a theoretical or at an intellectual level. When you actually face that difficulty of running a business and surviving and struggling and the stress and all that, that is a practical, experienced, lived difficulty, which would be 10 times harder or much more harder than your theoretical conception of it. So, theoretical experience, thinking about difficulty, you know that it's difficult. Everybody says, everybody realizes it, but they still do it. And when they actually do it, it might be much more difficult than you had even imagined it to be. So one must realize that there is a realizing that it is difficult intellectually and experiencing it actually are two different things. And the second part, the latter part, is very difficult, very tough, extremely tough. So these are words of caution for anybody who wants to become an entrepreneur or start something on one's own. So that's an important issue. Uh, some people do it without any experience. Nowadays, that happens to college students, and immediately after, the way it is happening, this startup culture of young college students from good colleges, IITs and IIMs, and maybe Harvard and Wharton and good engineering colleges and MBA colleges in India and abroad. So many of them do it without any experience at all, without working anywhere, without any job experience or work experience. So they are they have theoretical knowledge and they have an idea, and somebody, maybe they get the funding and they start. So actually starting, running the business, they have zero experience. So that is one difficulty. People who have some experience and do it is a different story. People who do it without experience is a different story. Of course, there are people who will support and guide and mentor and all that, but still realizing it that you are doing it without experience. So you have no experience of work, no work experience. You just have maybe one college degree or post graduation or some undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, and with zero experience of business or people or anything, you are trying to run the show. create a business, produce something, sell something, hire people, fire people, deal with customers, and all sorts of things. So with zero practical experience doing it is again a different ball game. But many people, the ecosystem that is being built is again, the startup culture is when young college people get into entrepreneurship. That is the fashion, that is the trend. So that again is something that one needs to really examine carefully. uh, Basically, economic reasons are at play here. I mean, when it started, the whole Silicon Valley culture, I mean, in US, the whole technical entrepreneurship and especially information technology and all that started in Silicon Valley in the US. And that was actually, entrepreneurship led to economic prosperity and growth because there were entrepreneurs who came out with new ideas. There were Google and Amazon and things that were not tried out earlier, and Microsoft and all these companies were born by these young, brilliant people who started out with ideas, Facebook, or all those success stories, major stories, and they actually did something new. So there was a combination of major invention or innovation and entrepreneurship, and they got funding because traditional funding would not be available for people with just an idea. So banks wouldn't give money to these people. Banks would need collateral and all that. So the whole ecosystem developed of venture capitals and private equity and all that, and they started funding these people, brilliant people. And those brilliant people had brilliant ideas, new ideas, innovative ideas, and they invented entire industries. So in a way, entrepreneurship actually led to economic prosperity and growth, and it was enabled by these brilliant people with new ideas, innovative ideas, and they got support through funding from venture capital and all that. So it did make a lot of sense, and actually it promoted economic growth and prosperity also. That is not necessarily the case now at the moment. Nowadays, the reality is that there are difficulties in terms of funding. People talk of funding winter. Right now, if we are talking about, I'm talking today is I'm talking, this is what, sometime in mid we are talking in 2023 April, middle of April 23. So at this point of time, the scenario in India or abroad is difficult. Economically speaking, startups are finding it difficult to raise money. The business models have changed, which we'll talk about some other day, and getting funding is becoming difficult. And the economic boom, the dot-com boom that happened, the IT boom that happened, all those things are things of the past. So right now things are under pressure. There is a lot of stress in the sector, and that is one thing. So the economic reality is different. It's not that, and there is a lot of Me Too entrepreneurship happening. People are doing the same thing, and it has become a trend or fashion. Venture capital will only fund certain sectors, and similar kinds of ventures we'll see. All e-commerce ventures, all doing practically something similar in this particular space only. So there is not much differentiation even among entrepreneurial models. Venture capital also has like flavor of the month kind of a mindset. It becomes a fashion that all venture capitalists will someday say that, look, we are only going to fund this, and so they will only fund enterprise in a certain sector, and these are all like maybe e-commerce or some such particular technological sector, very narrowly defined. So there is a lot of Me Too stuff going on. There is a lot of imitation going on. There is not much differentiation happening. And when that happens, there is a lot of competition. Competition for funding, competition for business, competition for customers. So it's not very healthy. So that's going to be another challenge. So entrepreneurship is there, getting promoted by venture funding. Venture capitalists have to fund new ventures, so they will find out some ventures to fund. But then again, it has become a standardized kind of a thing that they will fund people from good engineering and management institutes, and with there is a certain select club, and those guys get funding easily, and they are basically doing more or less the same thing. The funding is also of the similar sort, the businesses are of the similar sort. So the innovation part that was there, which drove this prosperity and boom and all that, is maybe missing a lot. And lots of things are kinds of me too ventures. Somebody, all are basically maybe related to e-commerce or internet or something, most of them. So because of that lack of innovation, the economics is a bit difficult now. Secondly, getting good jobs has become difficult, whether public sector jobs, private job sector jobs, or government jobs. And that's why government also promotes or wants to promote entrepreneurship, because if people get self-employed and people start getting successful at self-employment and maybe start employing people, then the economic problem of giving employment or generating employment goes away from the government's head, and the government doesn't have to bother too much about it. So the government would be happy if there were more entrepreneurship and more entrepreneurs. But the point is, the reality is, it is doing it because it is finding it difficult to create an economy in which enough good quality jobs are available, whether direct government jobs or even private sector jobs. Because of economic scenario, jobs will happen when there is economic boom, whether government private sector jobs will also happen when there is a demand and the economy is doing well and industries start investing and there is hiring and all that. So that is not happening. So entrepreneurship becomes a substitute for job, or self-employment becomes a substitute for job. You are asking people to become entrepreneurs because you are unable to employ them, and that's again a dangerous kind of a thing. So these are the driving factors sometimes, I feel, and they are not necessarily very meaningful or sensible driving or logical driving factors, and that could lead to chaos and heartburn and problems. One must understand that it's not the earlier Silicon Valley success story. If you talk of the current scenario, that is what I would like to warn people about, and they need to think carefully. Of course, still some would succeed. Even in the Me Too sector, something or the other would work out. But the earlier story, the earlier boom that was there, is largely missing. So think hard before you do it. So we have talked about this failure and statistically high rates of failure. Don't get attracted, just go by because these buzzwords and because everybody is promoting it. People are promoting it because people need to promote it. Venture capital has to find ventures to fund. Government needs people to stand on their feet, so that doesn't have to bother too much about getting them jobs. Industry is unable to generate enough jobs. Government sector doesn't believe in employing people, and government is maybe relying more on the private sector, and the private sector has its own issues. It will hire people when it can, or when it can afford to, or when it has to, or when it needs to. So because of these things, there is a pressure to generate this, have many startups and all that, and we have supports, of course, incubation and funding and mentoring and all that. So some people will get funding, some people will get help. It might become easier for some people, but for everybody it doesn't necessarily going to make sense, and everybody is not going to succeed at it. So the failure rate is not going to disappear, and now things are also getting difficult in terms of getting funding and all that. So these things must be kept in mind. So it's an exciting thing, fantastic thing. If it works, nothing like it. If it doesn't work, be ready for it, be prepared for it, to move on from it. Maybe try again, maybe try a different venture, maybe find a job. Maybe it is not, you are not cut out for it. Maybe look for a job, or maybe look for a different venture, and maybe a different venture will succeed. You have economic compulsions also, of bread and butter issues and survival issues also. So everybody will not do fantastically well. Some will fail, some will have hardships, some will manage, some will do a little bit better. One must keep this in mind. So all that heroism and glamour is, many people want to become film stars and superstars. How many actually make it? In a big country like that, one must keep that in mind, because there is enormous competition. There are a large demographic dividend, means India has a lot of young people looking for opportunities. That must be kept in mind. And I would still feel that the other viable option is entrepreneurship, where good large companies foster this culture of internal entrepreneurs. They hire people, they have employees working with them, but they don't treat them as employees. They treat their executives or their employees as entrepreneurs. It's like you are working in a company, you are an employee of that company, but the company lets you run a small part of the business, or gives you a product, or gives you a particular business division, or a profit center, or a strategic business unit, or something like that, or a division to run. In that sense, you are kind of master of your own fate. Even there are economic incentives. If you do well, the company will reward you suitably. It's not just simple salary and increment sort of a stuff. You can have stock options, and you can have other things also. So you can stay inside a large company. It's a job, but it's a job as if you are doing your own business. So entrepreneurship, if companies can foster it, that is also something that is, one should not sort of thumb one's nose at, and it's a good thing. Everybody won't be able to make it on his or her own out in the world, but if that person has a good job, and if the job itself offers something similar to entrepreneurship, the autonomy of the entrepreneurship, the excitement, creating something new, something different, so you can do all that even inside from a large company, if the company offers you the right culture and the structure and all that. So I would like to think of entrepreneurship as well as intrapreneurship. And just focusing on entrepreneurship for everybody may or may not make sense. That's what it is. So good luck, however you're thinking about it. Thank you.